Prayers.
Let us pray. Guide us, Lord, in all our doings with your gracious favor, and further us to your continual help. That in all our works begun, continued, and ended in you, we may glorify your holy name, and finally by mercy attain everlasting life, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Pour forth, we beseech you, O Lord, your grace into our hearts, that we, to whom the incarnation of Christ your Son was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, you have given us your only begotten Son to take our nature upon him and to be born of a pure virgin. Grant that we, who have been born again and made your children by adoption and grace, may daily be renewed by your Holy Spirit, through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, send forth, we beseech thee, upon thy servants who bear office in this country, the spirit of charity and justice, that they may in all things walk before thee with steadfast purpose and a single heart, and faithfully serve in their several offices, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forevermore. Amen.
The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the President.
I'm a receipt of a message from Her Excellency the President to the Honourable the Senate, which reads as follows. Her Excellency the President wishes to inform the Honourable the Senate that she will be absent from the country during the period 21st December 2023 to 3rd January 2024 on vacation leave. Her Excellency further wishes to inform the Honourable the Senate that, in accordance with the provisions of Section 33 of the Constitution, the Very Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Douglas Gibson will perform the functions of the Office of President for the period of Her Excellency's absence, signed by the President of State House, 19th December 2023.
Announcements by Your Honor.
Announcements, first of all, in receipt of minutes of our meeting held on November 29th, 2023 for confirmation. Senator Collins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, November 29, 2023 be confirmed.
The question is that the minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, November 29, 2023 be confirmed. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Meetings, yes, have it. Those minutes are accordingly confirmed. Further announcements. I have apologies for absence from Senator Dr. Chelson Braffett and Senator Monique Tate. and indications of late arrival from Senator Mr. Maynard, Senator Ann Bailey Boyce, and Her Honor Senator Henrietta Elizabeth Thompson.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I am commanded to lay the following document, the loan contract number 5827/OCBA, Program to Strengthen Social Services in Barbados, signed between the Government of Barbados and the Inter-American Development Bank.
Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions relating to the business or sitting of the Senate moved by minister, introduction of bills, public business.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of Senator the Honourable S. Monroe Knight, Minister of State in the Prime Minister's Office, to move the passing of a resolution that Parliament approve in accordance with the Guarantee of Loans Companies Act, Chapter 96, the guarantee by the Minister of Finance of the payment of the principal sum of $25 million and interest thereon to be borrowed by Kensington Oval Management, Incorporated, from African Export-Import Bank on the terms and conditions set out in the schedule to this resolution for the purpose of financing the rehabilitation and maintenance of sport infrastructures ahead of the 2024 Cricket World Cup.
Senator Dr. Monroe Knight.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as you can see, I'm in my Christmas colors. So I don't want to steal the thunder of the Leader of Government Business, but let me take this opportunity to wish you, Mr. President, and all of the other senators on this side and on the other side, and as well as all the other officials who are in the chamber this morning, season's greetings. Mr. President, there are some things that go together in Barbadian society. And when you talk about Barbados, there are some things that are just synonymous. It's like cuckoo and flying fish. I know you can do cuckoo with a little red herring, but the dish is cuckoo and flying fish. That's the Bajan way how to do that particular dish. It's like, Mr. President, conkeys and November. Those go together, part of the Bajan tradition. I would even dare say, and I'm sure to the charging of some, conkeys with raisins in November as well. Well, I'm glad that this chamber is agreed. I'm glad that this chamber is agreed. And certainly, Mr. President, as you are in the Christmas season, certainly, when you talk about Bajan Christmas, you're talking about the smells of freshly baked ham, sweet bread, Senator King, and pudding. Right? That's Bajan. That's the Bajan thing. Those things go together. And similarly, Mr. President, when you talk about Kensington Oval, it is synonymous with cricket. You talk and you hear Kensington Oval, you know that that name means cricket. And not just any kind of cricket, but good cricket, swashbuckling cricket in some instances, great moments of cricket. We call Kensington Oval our Mecca because for us, that long history rivals that of other famous grounds like the Lords. For us, it is our Mecca. Mr. President, it is our oldest cricketing ground, having been established in 1882 when the Pickwick Cricket Club bought 4 acres, leased rather, 4 acres of pasture land from Kensington Plantation and established the cricket ground with a clubhouse. Long history of Kensington. Kensington Oval, Mr. President, hosted the first England touring side in 1895, the first combined West Indies side, and it was the scene of the West Indies' first test match in 1930 against England, which ended in a draw. And Mr. President, whether or not you liked cricket, understood it, because everybody didn't understand it, everybody didn't like cricket per se, there was a sense that if you were a Barbadian or a West Indian, around that time when cricket was king, around that time when our cricketing legends were rampant on the world stage, that you understood that there was a link between cricket and nationhood. That the game was not just about the white ball. That the game was not just about, at that particular time, men beating a ball around a boundary. But that for most of us, in those early days, those men beating that ball was also like a proverbial lash against our prior colonial masters. That link between cricket, the panache, the confidence, when we saw our batsmen and bowlers on that field at Kensington, Mr. President. Whether you liked cricket or not, it made your back stand up a little bit straighter because it imbued you with a sense of pride that we could say to the world that we are more than sugar, more than the sweat, but that we can stand equal on the international stage with men who could, Mr. President, blade the other side and give them a proverbial lash, Mr. President, in the back end. And we appreciated that. And those are the moments that we have when we think about Kensington, when we think about the history of Kensington. Those are the moments that we're talking about, those iconic moments. Mr. President, I remember in 1999, I had to go back and look for the date, so I'm not going to pretend that I got all the stats. And I'm sure that there are others here. I'm looking at the end, to a fellow senator at the end who I know will correct me if I make any mistake. I will fill in all the blanks and all of the others. March 30th, 1999, was it? Senator Nichols, Brian Lara, here at Kensington Oval. It was an iconic match. We were facing Australia, Mr. President, if I remember correctly. It was a 3-match test series. We had lost the first match in Trinidad and Tobago, drawn the second one in Jamaica. So the one here in Kensington, we won Jamaica? Good. So we win Jamaica. Oh, so everything lock up. Everything lock up. So we coming here now for Kensington for the battle, Mr. President. For the battle against Australia, who was at that time triumphant in the cricketing world. And Mr. President, we were facing, in that epic innings played by Brian Lara, 310 for victory, and a 5th day with a deteriorating pitch. Brian Lara scored 153 not out. 153 not out. In the same match in which Courtney Walsh bowled, I think it was 5 for 39, over 17.1 overs. And in that same match as well, Sherwin Campbell scored 105, Mr. President. I was not down at Kensington, but I remember watching it on TV, Mr. President. It was jubilation, it was pandemonium, it was excitement, it was cricket at its best at Kensington Oval. It was, again, one of those iconic moments, because there was something about the pitch, Mr. President, at Kensington that delivered these iconic moments for cricket, that made people from all over the world come to Barbados for cricket at Kensington in particular, because they want to be in the place, Mr. President, where these moments happen. And if I begin to talk about the moments of our famous opening batsman pair, Mr. President, we can be here forever. The moments that we had from Marshall, Mr. President. So the point, Kensington and cricket. Kensington and good cricket. And the iconic nature of Kensington Oval, and what it means, yes, for us as Barbadians, but also as well to the world, Mr. President. Mr. President, of course, if I don't speak to the recent exploits of Shea Hope, then I will expose myself as a cricket fan of the vintage era and not necessarily of the present. And perhaps I don't know if I should apologize for that. I'm a faint of heart cricket fan, Mr. President. I'm not a fair weather, I'm with you, but God protect my heart. So I try to make sure that I don't get overly invested now in the game. But we continue to see those iconic moments at Kensington Oval. Mr. President, it was not only the cricket, but it was the atmosphere. And when I was preparing for this debate, I remembered King Dial. I remember King Dial creating that atmosphere at Kensington. The flair, Gary Sorbers and the color turn up. All of those were moments that we remember at Kensington. The association of Kensington with cricketing greatness, Mr. President, continued in 2014 when 6 of our own cricket legends were inducted into the ICC Hall of Fame right at Kensington Oval. And of course, we have our own Cricket Legends Museum. But Mr. President, as very often happens, the things that we revere, the things that are important and sometimes give us the greatest joy, we sometimes don't often take sufficient care of. Sometimes we take them for granted and forget that they need a level of investment in order to make sure that they maintain the glory that we are accustomed to. And therefore, Mr. President, we have a Kensington Oval that unfortunately has fallen into some level of disrepair. Mr. President, I would go so far as to say, held together by a stitch and a prayer and some paint. A stitch and a prayer and some paint, Mr. President. And it is in this context that this government, through this resolution, which is seeking to provide an investment to guarantee a major investment in Kensington in the sum of US $25 million for the refurbishment and upgrade of the facilities. It is an investment not only in the infrastructure, but an investment that will ensure that Kensington Oval can become self-sufficient and revenue generating, Mr. President. So that while we will see on the face of it, yes, that this is a loan that is about preparing us for the World Cup, the investment will have further downstream benefits. One, for Kensington itself, but also as well, Mr. President, for the economy as well. Mr. President, I want to remind that the last major investment in Kensington Oval, quite coincidentally, took place in preparation for the country to host the international, and Mr. President, I'm going to read it out, Cricket Council's Cricket World Cup in 2007. The decision was taken in 2003 to completely redevelop the Kensington Oval to bring it up to international cricket standards. And the Oval was then formally reopened on the 17th of February 2007. We hosted 7 matches, including the final on the 28th of April 2007. And of course, Mr. President, those of us who are cricket aficionados would know that we also went on in 2010 to host the World Cup T20 matches here. So major investment, 2007, Mr. President, for a facility, as I said, that is historic, it is iconic, an important part of our national development story. And therefore, the government seeking to make this investment, and yes, Mr. President, there are those that would be concerned about the fact that we are borrowing to do so. But I want to indicate that the terms of the loan will be for a period of 7 years at an interest rate of 7% with a 2-year moratorium, Mr. President, and that it will add 0.33% of GDP to our debt profile. 0.33% for a loan for 7 years, interest rate 7% with a 2-year moratorium. Mr. President, normally we would have about 18 months or 2 years to prepare for a World Cup. Unfortunately, given the circumstances, and not circumstances on our side, I would say that the ICC has been a little bit unfair to us because now we are challenged to prepare for this World Cup in a period of just about 5 months, Mr. President. So it means that we need to be able to galvanize the resources in order to do what is necessary to ensure that Kensington is a fit-for-purpose ground in preparation for the upcoming T20 matches, which are going to be held, Mr. President, over that period of June 4th till about the 31st, Mr. President, to the 30th, Mr. President, in Barbados. And I want to make the point again, Mr. President, that the investment, this $25 million, the government is guaranteeing to be loaned 25 US. That the government is guaranteeing to be loaned to Kensington Oval Management Incorporated, COMI, by the African Import-Export Bank, Mr. President, is an investment that we are sure will be able to reap the necessary returns. And an investment that goes beyond just infrastructure. It's an investment in cricket development, Mr. President. Mr. President, I had the opportunity to do a couple of site visits at COMI. Quite recently, I did one this year. And Mr. President, you know, I got to do a Beijing, let me tell you. I don't know, I've never used the bathrooms at Kensington Oval, but during the site visit, I had cause to be able to do so. And Mr. President, there should be a sign that says, use only in emergencies. Because the sight, the smell, the look, Mr. President, harkens back to a time that should be past, Mr. President. I was able to go into the players' pavilions. And Mr. President, now players need those fancy ice baths, and they need places for recuperation, all of those. And we have players' facilities that, Mr. President, are not up to par. We have one little small ice bath that one person can go in at a time, Mr. President. We have spaces, Mr. President, not necessarily set up for comfortable eating. We have places, Mr. President, without proper Wi-Fi. We have places where officials are in, where a number of officials are in, that have only one bathroom, Mr. President, and not designated as the Barbados way for male and female. So that in the context of our seeking to host the upcoming World Cup matches, and also as well the venue assessment that was done by the ICC, it noted that we need to be able to ensure that Kensington Oval was made fit for purpose. And in particular, the ICC assessment identified a number of things we needed to address, Mr. President. One, the light towers it said, Mr. President, we need to increase what they refer to as the lux levels of the lighting. That is to make sure that they were made brighter. The players' pavilion needs to be upgraded. We needed to install temporary stands. We needed to upgrade the southeast hospitality structure, upgrade the bathrooms, as I alluded to, make sure that we had backup power, do a number of repairs and painting, make sure that we had additional replay screens, install proper Wi-Fi, refurbishment of the practice nets, furniture, fixtures and equipment, and other things, Mr. President. And so, as we seek to be able to respond to that assessment, which says, listen, we need to be able to have a fit-for-purpose facility in the space of time that we've been given, Mr. President. The government is seeking to guarantee, like I said, through this loan to COMI, to make sure that Barbados can benefit, one, because we understand that having these matches come to Barbados in June here to bring tourists, to bring visitors, will have multiple benefits for the country. Mr. President, we understand as well that doing so spurs, again, businesses, small businesses, to be able to also benefit, taxi operators, Mr. President, to be able to also benefit from that increased activity for those matches over the period. And Mr. President, we are still waiting the very final word from the ICC, particularly in terms of some of the fixtures that we have been awarded. But we know that we will have a number of matches, including 2, the Super 8 matches, group stage matches as well. And I also want to note that the law not only covers those things I have identified that the ICC venue assessment indicated, but also as well that the Barbados Cricket Association has identified that we need to bring up several practice matters, several practice facilities, including the Windward Cricket Club, University of the West Indies 3Ws Oval, and the Police Sports Club up to standard for World Cup. And all of these will be repaired and equipped, Mr. President, with, like I said, regrading, bringing them up to standard, and also as well with new equipment. Additionally, because it's important as well, like I said, that we are looking long term, that it's not just about an investment just singularly in infrastructure, but that the package of upgrades also include a complete state-of-the-art indoor facility, Mr. President, and the installation of drop-in pitches and field protective covering. And Mr. President, as you can imagine, the provision of indoor facilities then again also opens up a new market for Kensington Oval and its revenue generating ability as well. So again, looking just beyond the World Cup, but making sure that we then have a Kensington that will be able to continue, one, to pay for itself, but also as well, Mr. President, invest in its ongoing maintenance, which is critical. But at the same time, Mr. President, I don't want to give the impression that government has only been making an investment or will only make this big substantial investment in COMI just around the World Cup. But if we take a look at the estimates for COMI for 2023-2024, you would have seen that they would have been funds that would have been assigned for COMI to begin to already do some refurbishments. So that even before we understood, again, that Barbados would be awarded any of the World Cup matches, or before that we have thought necessarily about the World Cup, we'd already seen COMI and the government investing in a number of upgrades. And these included the stand refurbishments to the Greenwich and Haynes, Hewitt and Innes and Hall and Griffin stands, repairs to the Garfield Sobers Pavilion, LED big screen replacement, the linear scoreboard replacement, fire detection upgrades, sound system equipment, power cable replacement, and as well, security cameras. The government as well had also previously invested in COMI support for the installation of an 800 plus kilowatt photovoltaic system that will be on all of the roofs in each stand. Again, Mr. President, an investment in making sure that COMI is self-sustaining. So even as we guarantee this loan and make this investment, we are assured then that we are not just putting funds as a drop in a bucket, but again, creating a framework, one, to make sure that the loan can be repaid, but also as well that COMI can continue over the long term to be self-sustaining. But there are other revenue-generating activities that COMI is currently working on, Mr. President. This year, COMI initiated a marble cricket tour where they sought to develop a package, Mr. President, for locals and visitors alike to re-engage this once traditional sport. They're also currently working with the University of the West Indies and the cricket legends to build out a full tour, and there are plans on an ongoing basis to continue to engage tourism officials to ensure that we can have these stores as part of the tourism fair, again, for visitors and also for locals, Mr. President. COMI has also been working on a grant with the Caribbean Development Bank to examine the feasibility of leveraging its brand to sell cricket-based goods and services globally that are produced locally by micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And of course, Mr. President, the establishment of naming rights of Kensington Oval is an initiative that we are hoping will provide millions of dollars annually in revenue for Kensington. Again, Mr. President, making sure that it will be self-sustaining. It is planned, Mr. President, that as soon as we are able to complete the physical infrastructure build-out and the handover of Kensington to the ICC, hopefully, Mr. President, sometime in April, that we will then move our attention to putting out the international bids in order to get the naming rights frame started, Mr. President, and immediately then begin before, Mr. President, hopefully, the financial period of 2024 to 2025 to begin to see some revenue payoff, Mr. President, from those naming rights. Mr. President, I also want to say that part of what we will be doing in the context of the upcoming T20 matches, Mr. President, is that our bid has been formulated around the notion of producing a green tournament, and as well one that will leverage the technological advancements that we have in Barbados through using cashless systems, Mr. President. Making sure that our transport systems, again, using our electric vehicles, again, because COMI, with the installation of the photovoltaic systems that will be installed hopefully by February, will then make sure that we can have a unique kind of tournament, offer a unique experience in terms of having a green tournament. But not only that, we're also leveraging our cultural assets as well. And the National Cultural Foundation will be working with COMI, will be working with the committee that will be planning and have already started to plan how we will engage and make sure that as a country we are ready for the World Cup. A number of cultural events, again, producing a whole of Barbados event that will have multifold benefits, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I close, Mr. President, as I close, I want to emphasize the importance of this investment in COMI, in this investment in cricket development, in this investment, Mr. President, to assure that this iconic ground, that this nexus that we have between cricket and national development continues to be a close one, continues to be one that we can be proud of. And certainly, I am sure if Kensington Oval itself could speak, that it would say, thank you, and it's about time. Those few words, Mr. President, I am obliged.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Monroe Knight. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to support this resolution, and I'm not going to rehash or repeat a lot of what has already been said. I think those listening understand the importance of cricket to Barbados and to the region as a whole. But what I do want to do is speak a little bit about how we got here. Because Kensington Oval, if you listen to our commentators and you listen to people from around the world, they always refer to it as the Mecca of cricket in the Caribbean. And I have seen over many years, just as an observer, a lot of missed opportunities for us to use Kensington Oval in a manner that would bring in a lot more revenue than it does. I'll give you a very classic example. I remember going to Kensington Oval to watch a cricket match which had a lot of ex-cricketers involved in it. And the place was completely sold out. And I thought to myself, well, why isn't this part and parcel now of what Comey does on a regular basis? Becoming not just a venue, but becoming promoters also of what their primary business is, that is cricket. And when I was minister responsible for sport, I felt then we had a touring team from Bangladesh. It was the army. And they were here, and I had the opportunity to meet with them, and they were playing against the BDF here. And I thought to myself at that time, but here again presents another opportunity. What if we were able to begin the process of inviting armies, cricket teams from all of the cricketing nations, especially if you're talking about places like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, the numbers of cricketing fans that you have there to do these types of tournaments. If you have policemen, the lawyers, I mean, it can go on, and you can do it regionally, and you can do it internationally, and bring people to these shores. And again, with all of the television rights and all the other things that are happening in the world today, I still feel that what we're doing here today gives us the opportunity now to correct some of the mistakes that we may have made in the past, not understanding from a historical standpoint the value of Kensington Oval. I had the opportunity to be at Run Barbados many years ago, also when I was a minister, and to have a gentleman from India come up to me. Someone told him that I was the minister, and he came up to me. There were two things he wanted to do. One was to meet Sir Gary, and the second one was to just go to Kensington Oval to touch the grass. That is all he wanted to do. And I thought to myself, we take these things for granted. We take even the persons for granted. But here it is, this gentleman had come to Barbados from India. I think he was here for a conference, but this was all he wanted to do. And at that particular point in time, there was no way that we could have facilitated the request at that particular point in time. But it struck me that here we are sitting down on what I would consider to be a gold mine, but not using the collective wisdom that resides on this 166 square miles to make use of it. And I say this because I've seen in the past where when West Indies cricket was at its height, missed opportunities. And if there's one thing that I always try to make an analogy of, cricket, apart from being sport, is also entertainment. And in the entertainment world, Mr. President, we know that if you have a hit song at any particular point in time, that is when you make your money. That is when the cost of bringing you from Barbados, be it to France, be it to Spain, be it to Japan, is a complete different ball game to if you're just wallowing somewhere down there. Now, at the height of West Indies cricket, that is when you strike, as the old people would say, you strike when the iron is hot. So that when we make this particular investment in getting the facilities up to par, we've got another investment that we have to make, and that is in getting the cricket up to par. Because if we got a fantastic venue, we don't have a winning cricket team, it's like what the old people say, spin it up in mud. You just be going around in circles. So one can't go without the other. And if this is the first steps in being able to give people the quality facilities that we can host games and other things like that, you also have to begin to think, what is the investment going to be in women's cricket? What is the investment going to be in ensuring that if I had my own way, it would happen? That cricket became mandatory in schools, that everybody must play cricket. They're not all going to be cricketers. But I grew up in a village where, from my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, everybody knew everything about cricket. I can tell you all the field placements when I didn't know them. They know all the names. They know everything about the game. And they made up the audience that was willing to pay to see the game because they were invested in it. And these are the things that we have to see this particular investment as being a first step in us being able to bring not only West Indian, but Barbadian cricket to where it should be. You know, Mr. President, sometimes I get a little angry when I remember the heyday of cricket in Barbados, for me, as people in my age group, the 80s, when touring teams come into this country had no chance of beating Barbados at all. Not one. And the West Indies cricket team, at its peak, was filled to capacity with Barbadians. In fact, Mr. President, I dare say that we had fellas who could not even get into the team, whom at that particular point in time, if they had the ability to play for other territories, as some of our cricketers do today, they would have taken it, or at least I would have encouraged them to take it and make use for themselves. And so, I know, and I expect, that you're going to hear a number of people talking about the $25 million. It's a lot of money, US dollars, there's a lot of money and all this kind of thing. But I want to remind people that in today's world, I can sit down at home and listen to salaries that basketball players are getting, $25 million a year. US. Oh yes, yeah, no, Senator. 25 a year. If you work it out over the time, the million, the 100 millions and stuff like that, you can get it down to 25 million a year. I'm telling you. And so therefore, when you hear the naysayers, because they will come out of the woodworks as they always do. They will come talking about what you can do with all this money for Kensington and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. The returns, you might not be able to see it now in front of you, because a lot of people, and I know from my own experience, going into business with some people and putting in investment today and by tomorrow, they want $10 million. And you ask yourself, what planet these people living on? It don't work like that. But you have to make the investments in order to reap the benefits from those investments over a period of time. And so, Mr. President, I think it is important that all of the senators in here today have a chance to speak or take the opportunity to speak on this particular matter. Because as I said earlier, a lot of people in the public space who love to hear themselves on the radio will take the opportunity to constantly go after things that government does like this and try to tear it to pieces and to make people believe that it's a waste of time, and the talk goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And it tells me a lot about the period in time that we find ourselves in this country, where even things that are done with the best of intentions, or things that are even done for the benefit of generations to come, still seem for people who are stuck in their ways to be an extremely difficult thing to handle. And cricket, for me, Mr. President, more so than any other thing that you can think of, Barbados has excelled in that area beyond anyone's wildest dreams for a small population, 166 square miles. Oftentimes you will hear people saying, we have produced the greatest cricketer in the world. And I say yes to that. But I also remind them, or at least I try to correct them, we have created the greatest cricketers in the world. There's a long list of them. And out of what, Mr. President? Out of villages, from the grassroots of this country. Cricket was I should say, not was, still is, in a sense, in the veins of our people. And it is important that investments like these are made and that we try, as I said earlier, to get this game back to a level where persons not only want to come here to see matches when matches are put on by ICC or whoever else, but if Barbados has things going on, that you will have people from all over the world wanting to be involved in it. And when I look, you know, I smile when I see a lot of my friends, as soon as the IPL starts, they're on the televisions, morning, noon, and night. And if they can't see it on television, they get to social media to see the clips and whatever things. And if there's one thing that we can learn from, is take a good leaf out of India's book and to see how they've been able to capitalize on the success of their programs to getting their cricketers to the levels that they are at, that you have people now from all over the world vying to get into the IPL to play actual cricket, but also inspiring, even within a place that you would probably years ago would never think that cricket would rear its head in the USA. So the opportunities, Mr. President, are there. And I am a firm believer that in life, if you want to measure yourself by anything, you don't measure yourself by people who are behind you. You measure yourself by those who are ahead of you. and you try to learn from them as to how they got to where they're at. And when you learn how to get to where you're at, you see how you can sustain it or surpass them. I've lived my life like that, and I don't think at this stage of it I would want to change. But I would encourage Kwame, when all of this is done, and I looked at the things that they were looking at tours, they were looking at entertainment in terms of putting other things, but again, cricket is their primary business. And I would want to encourage them to take up the mantle of, and you can find partners, there are always willing partners out there, where it's not just CPL, but you don't have to be all professional cricketers. As I said earlier, there are a lot of people who travel for leisure and who love these games and who would travel to play, or even in terms of coming to Kensington to practice when they can't in other things. There's so many opportunities that are available to them, and all it takes is for, like I said, collective thoughts, and we can do this. And so, Mr. President, again, I support this resolution 100%, and I'm hoping that we can see from this that the general public will be inspired, especially those parents who I see on a daily basis taking their little ones to cricket practice and other things, to get out there and really support and make sure that when you have the winning teams, and I have to stress this all the time, winning teams can earn money. People pay to see winners. You have negotiating power when you're a winner. And so therefore, with those few words, I'm obliged to say.
Thank you very much, Senator King. Senator Malalo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to be brief. Good morning, everyone, and happy Christmas to everyone as well. It is that season as we meet here in just a few days to celebrate Christmas. My comments really going to be limited in two areas, but before I go there, I just want to say what I heard in a very summary way, Mr. President, from the Senator Knight, Monroe Knight, who introduced this bill. I heard a great deal about the Mecca. I heard a great deal about the oldest cricket ground in Barbados. I heard about a long history of cricket. I heard a lot of things about iconic moments. In fact, I was there for some of those iconic moments as a schoolboy, walking down into the schoolboy stand and watching it in those years. All of that I understand. But the bill before us, Mr. President, is a guarantee of a loan. It's not about cricket and the passion of cricket and so on. That's for another day. I support all of that. What, as a senator in here today, I'm being asked to do is to approve a guarantee of a loan. So let's perhaps take a look at what a guarantee is. And I think as individuals, as we were building our personal lives and perhaps building our businesses, we've all looked to someone to help us with a guarantee when we didn't really qualify for the particular loan, and we needed someone in the background to stand in our stead should we not be able to make it, or if we just didn't have the credibility at the time to get that loan. In fact, a guarantee loan is generally used by borrowers with poor credit, limited financial means, and it generally enables financially unattractive candidates to qualify for a loan. So I think we need to recognize that the only reason, frankly, that this would be a guarantee is because this is financially unattractive. Comey can't stand on its own based upon its history, and the government needs to stand in behind it to make a guarantee. Now, Mr. President, I don't object to that. I've heard, in fact, what sounds like the complete rebuilding of Kensington Oval. It's a bit surprising to me that we have not maintained it over the period from 2007 or 2008, I remember at the time, as a younger business person, hearing about the legacy that was going to come of it and all the various things. And that, listen, there have been successive governments involved in here, and there's no finger pointing at any particular government. It's just the reality of how governments run businesses, it seems. But I've heard bathrooms, player pavilion, officials area, light towers, temporary stands, hospitalities, big screen. At the end, is the whole place. We got to rebuild the whole place. Well, obviously we're not rebuilding the whole place for 25 million US dollars. But in any case, when I add the two things together, what I'm actually being asked to do here today, which is to guarantee a loan. Generally speaking, if you come to me with a guarantee, you want me to give you a guarantee, there's really only one question I'm going to ask you, Mr. President. Show me your business plan. That's what I would ask you. And if you present to me a business plan that I think is viable, that is perhaps not bankable, so you can't borrow money based upon that, but I feel that it is viable, and I feel that it is the right thing, I'll give you a guarantee. But you come with a business plan. But that, Mr. President, is not what I've seen at all. Nowhere in the documentation can I find anywhere that says how this is going to be repaid. I've heard anecdotal comments about a facility that we will be able to pay, well, that will be able to pay for itself. I can find that nowhere, Mr. President, in any of the documents. But I'm willing even to accept that, Mr. President. I'm willing to even accept that, because I recognize that sometimes some things are priorities, and the government has to do things quickly. And that leads me to my final point, sir. What are the priorities, therefore? And it concerns me that we come here today with this priority in front of us. And I shall only mention one area where I would have thought, perhaps, as a priority, the government could have dealt with. Because we're coming here to deal with this with 5 months to go to get this ready for June. But, Mr. President, would the Chamber be surprised to hear that the air conditioning system at Grantley Adams International Airport has been operating at less than 60% capacity for almost the last 3 years, sir? 3 years. Mr. President, would it surprise the Chamber to find out that on the day of our independence, on our Republic Day, on our National Day, November 30th, I traveled on that day. And I am not speaking about anything that anyone told me. I traveled a significant amount, and on that day, I was traveling. And I was at the Grantley Adams International Airport, along with, I don't want to get my numbers wrong, but it was somewhere around 7,000 or 8,000 people traveled through that airport that day because it was a cruise ship transfer day. On that particular day, the air conditioning was working at less than 20% capacity, sir. 20%. It was one of the busiest days of the season. Tourists and locals alike, like myself, were sweating and fanning in the place. The last impression, our valuable tourists, this most important business to us, this business that during COVID we learned how important it was to us. It is our number one employer. It is our number one foreign exchange earner. But our priority cannot be to fix the air conditioning going into the biggest tourist season that we've ever seen. We are very lucky as a country as we face this Christmas period, this tourist season. I can tell you as a practitioner within the area, Mr. President, this is one of our busiest seasons that we have ever seen. We have increased hotel capacity through great investment. We have increased airlift. We have increased cruise ship transfers. But we have the worst air conditioning system at Grantley Adams Airport. That the last impression that our valuable tourists, where tourism is our business, that they're going to find is that they're going to have to sweat and fan themselves there. So I'm talking about priorities, sir. So this bill itself, sir, as I will close on this. This is a guarantee, and unfortunately for me as a business person, if you bring a guarantee to me, come to me with a business plan, and I will make a decision. If you don't have a business plan and it's a priority, let me make sure you got your priorities right. So unfortunately for me, sir, I can see no business plan, nor can I see how the priority has been chosen. And with those few words, sir, I think my position is clear. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Malou. Senator Dr. Christina Hines.
Thank you, Mr. President. Season's greetings to all. I wasn't sure that I was going to speak because I believed that Senator Malou was going to say all of the things that I wanted to say. And he said quite a few of them, and I'm thankful to him for doing so, because I do understand the importance of Kensington Oval. I had a great time at the Oval over the weekend, not playing cricket, but I know that this is an important place for sports, for entertainment, for so many things in Barbados. I have had the pleasure of actually playing hockey at the Oval when we used to use that as one of the grounds for the hockey festival. And it is a wonderful ground, it's a lovely atmosphere. It is something that we certainly need to ensure is maintained, invested in appropriately. We know it as the Mecca of cricket, although I've seen some consternation from some of our colleagues across the region on social media, on Twitter, about why Bajans always feel that we must be the center of the universe and everything. Anyway, that aside, it's clear that it's important to invest in our important sporting facilities, and that Kensington Oval is a critical facility. But let's get to the loan issue. And this is really my concern. Like Senator Malou, I am less concerned with the quantum of the loan, the 25 million. He didn't say that he was not concerned with the amount, but I am concerned about what the amount is being used for. So we've heard some outlines of some of the things. It would have been helpful for us to see the intentions for these monies. So he's calling it a business plan. I certainly think it would be useful to see how this money is going to be spent. That's one thing. But the other thing, which is really my concern, has to do with the terms of this loan. And it is a loan over a 5-year period, which is not particularly long. So I suppose that means that we are somewhat optimistic in a 7-year loan. Okay, 7-year loan. We are still optimistic in the ability for COMI to be able to repay this, or this will fall on the government of Barbados. That's what guarantee is about. When you get a guarantee for your student revolving loan, and then people don't pay the student revolving loan, you're going to go to the guarantor and chase them down. So we're not saying that COMI is not going to be able to deal with this, but as it is a guarantee, we have to be open to the possibility that this loan will fall on the government. And I did hear Senator Dr. Monroe Knight indicate that it would account for a very small proportion of our debt, 0.33%, she indicated. So not necessarily significant. But coming back to the loan and the terms of it, I was a little bit shocked when I saw the interest rate. And I wondered to myself why we are taking a loan that has a 7% interest rate. I tried to listen on my way here. I was running a bit late because I had some other matters to attend to. I didn't hear, in what I was listening to on my way here, I didn't hear that part addressed. But why a 7% rate of interest? I know that from sitting here and listening to much of the commentary surrounding our other debts in Barbados, we generally have been receiving quite low interest rates. And I can accept that this is not a loan to the government, but to COMI that we are guaranteeing. And since it may not be the most attractive entity to which to lend, perhaps this can account for a somewhat higher interest rate than that which the government of Barbados has been able to receive from entities like International Monetary Fund, IDB, and so on. But I still find this to be a high interest rate over a 7-year period. I looked at the London Interbank Offer Rate, that's LIBOR. I know that this has to some extent, I've been reading that has been being used less and less, but this rate currently is 5.47%. And 7% is above that. Not slightly above. Above. When I look, and this was yesterday when I found that labor rate. I don't know what it is today. But the point is, it's not in the range of 7%. I also looked at what I have learned is being increasingly employed rather than LIBOR, which is the London Interbank Offer Rate, which is the secured overnight facility rate, which is currently 5.33%. And I was also able to see the forward rates for this. So these are the rates into the future. And by November 2024, this will drop to 4.0%. These are projections, so we know that things can intervene to affect this. I'm not certain. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? I would really hope that we don't have more things intervening next year than have already intervened this year. Please, no, right? But let's say other things intervene, this can change. But that projection to November 2024 is 4.01%. By the end of 2024, 3.62%. And when we look at those forward projections into 2028, the rate is around 3.2%. 7 years, so we have that 2-year moratorium. If we look, even according to these projections to 2030, we have rates in that vicinity. So I'm wondering if it is that we were not able, those involved in Comey were not able to, especially with the guarantee of the government. So if it was Comey going on its own, this 7% may have been some insurance then for the lender because they're risky. But with this government guarantee, why were we not able to get a rate that was at least in line with either LIBOR or SOFR, which is the secured overnight facility rate? And these few percentage points might not sound a lot, 1.5%, 2%. If we take these projections as potentially being accurate into the future, we're talking about 4%. That's quite a bit. But we can think about the savings in interest payments that both Comey and potentially, though hopefully not, the government of Barbados would have seen by having a better, a more attractive interest rate. I am sure most of us in here and in this country have received loans, and we try our best to get the best interest rate we can get. When you get a mortgage, for instance, and you get your mortgage at 5%, and then you see 2 years later that the same financial institution is offering persons now receiving a mortgage, now applying for a mortgage, 4.5%. One of the things that you can do, and if you're like me that you do, is you contact the financial institution quick and find out how is it that my interest rate is above these people's own, and can mine be moved? And my experience is that they are quite accommodating in moving them. But this is a fixed interest rate that we are dealing with. So, first of all, in my estimation, it is a high one. Secondly, I would really want to know if there is the ability to negotiate this downwards if it is that these projections for SOFR are accurate. The secured overnight facility rate. I don't know if I pronounce that SOFR. SOFR. If these are correct, will we be able to negotiate these downwards, or are we going to be paying more than we perhaps would want to pay for the finances of Comey? So this is going to be eaten into these profits that we're expecting Comey to make. We have been told, Senator Dr. Monroe Knight has indicated that Comey is going to be able to sustain this facility, that it is going to be a profitable facility. And if we are receiving an interest rate at 7%, this actually eats into those profits that can be used for other things such as reinvestment into the maintenance of Kensington Oval, so that we're not in this position again. We know that sporting facilities the world over, especially when investments are made for major sporting events, Olympics, Commonwealth Games, Football World Cup, etc. They do not generally have a very good history of being able to maintain these facilities for the future, because you get all of this investment, all of this traffic around the time of the activity, and then these things turn into ghost facilities. I don't think that we should expect this of Kensington Oval because of the nature of cricket. This is not just about the World Cup. We are going to continue to have cricket, and if we have a very attractive facility, we can market this very well and make sure we have the tours, etc., that will bring the traffic and the like to the Oval. And once we continue to have these activities like the one I went to over the weekend, there will be other sorts of activity to bring money into the Oval. Although I have a little bit of a slight caution, I had a blast, right? I loved a concert at the Oval. But I continue to have a concern about using sporting facilities for some of these entertainment purposes, especially when the high heels are out on the field. These places are not made for high heels and some of the other things that occur. But I mean, I leave that to those who are in charge of maintaining the facility to ensure that they have whatever they need to protect the grounds. But what I am saying here is that these profits that we expect from Kensington Oval would be best used if they could be reinvested into the maintenance, the upkeep. I heard when I was watching the T20, one of the commentators, the last one that was here in Barbados, against England, one of the commentators was complaining about the field, that he is disappointed with the quality of the field. The sports commentators, not the people that I hear criticizing that just on the radio talking because they got more. Not a Mason, I guess then. But an actual sports commentator hired for the purpose of evaluating the cricket. Complaining about the quality of the field. So these are things that we have to ensure. And I believe we could be doing ourselves a disservice if we are not able to maximize the amount of the profit that can be plowed back into the Oval because we are paying a high interest rate. I know we are at the point of approving this. I don't know if there's any room for renegotiation. I believe this is probably something that we want to get out of the way today, so it's the 7% that we can take. But I would have hoped that we could get the best possible deal in terms of interest rates if we are taking out a loan of this nature. The time, okay, you have that 2-year buffer in there. I still feel that it's relatively short, but let me say, okay, the time is reasonable, 7 years. But is the interest rate reasonable? And are we doing the best by Kensington Oval in accepting this interest rate? This bank that we are using is supposed to be our new partner and friend and all kind of thing. Coming from Africa, the motherland. So I would hope that the negotiation would be cognizant of the position of Barbados as a small island developing state, the vulnerabilities that we face that may make it harder for us to live up to some of these expectations at this rate of 7%. Mr. President, I'm obliged.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Hines. Senator Nichols.
Mr. President, I would take it that you would not be surprised if I were to say that I have no difficulty in supporting this resolution to borrow money for the upgrade of the historic, iconic Kensington Oval. I listened carefully to the comments from the two independent senators who spoke, and I want, sir, to assure them that a lot of thought has gone into the government's decision to bid for matches in the ICC Cricket T20 World Cup 2024 and the concomitant obligations of the government to ensure that not only Kensington Oval, but all of the facilities for additional practice grounds and the infrastructure that is necessary to host a global tournament of the magnitude of an ICC Cricket World Cup, that Barbados can meet all of its obligations. So I'd like to tarry between two comments made almost a century ago, one by one of the first great West Indian cricketers, Sir Larry Constantine, and another by C.L.R. James, the Dean of Caribbean Intellectual Thought in the last century. And the reason why I do so is that I am very conscious of the fact that Barbados is spelled C-R-I-C-K-E-T and is recognized in the world. That is how the name is spelled. Our contribution to the game and to the development of the game and the world of cricket's understanding of the game. In fact, Mr. President, you only have to point to the fact that the English opening batsman who just scored 200s in the last two games, at both interviews mentioned his upbringing in Barbados as the basis for his rapid development and his entry into the English side. And our contribution is well known. But seriously, I try to contextualize why the government is making this conscious decision as opposed to what occurred in Jamaica, where Jamaica did not make a bid, as opposed to Dominica, which made a bid but had to pull out after they could not meet the specifications of the ICC bidding, and why St. Kitts and Nevis and Grenada, who bidded for the 2007 World Cup, did not bid at all. This World Cup, the ICC budget is $100 million US. I was just looking at the information available on the internet about the recent economic impact of the last ICC 50-over World Cup, which recently concluded in India. And it's added about $2.6 billion to the Indian economy. But that is a vastly different cricketing economy and society than the small economies of the Caribbean. But certainly the economic impact assessments of the last T20 World Cup in Australia was over $300 million US in value added to the Australian economy as a result of the World Cup. So I remember carefully to observe the work of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, which did a cricket study and economic impact assessment after the 2007 ICC World Cup. And one would argue from the outturn figures that the society and economy in Barbados has benefited from the government's investment in that World Cup. And I want to say, Mr. President, we talk about the third World Cup final possibly happening at Kensington Oval, and I understand that the final placements for the games where they will be played will be coming out sometime tomorrow or at least later this week. And we will know whether Barbados will host not the third, but the fourth World Cup final. Because in 2007, we had the World Cup final for the first time. In 2010, we had two finals on one day. There was a women's final and a men's final. And there is a reason, Mr. President, that Barbados' significant competitive advantages leads the cricket world to want to come here and participate in what we do. There will be about 8 to 9 matches hosted in Barbados over this period. And we do not have to jump from the mountaintop and speak about the impact of cricket to the local economy. Because the tour season had not started when the English were here for just 2 games. The official winter season had not started. But all of the players in the sector were speaking last week about the significant impact that the English visitors brought on the tour of just 2 games. A T20 game, which is about 3.5 hours, and an ODI. We're speaking about a World Cup. And this World Cup, Mr. President, it will be the largest ICC T20 World Cup in its history. 20 teams. So that when we assess the rebound the Barbados economy has seen, especially after COVID, it's been tourism-led. The IMF reports that were carried in the press 2 days ago spoke glowingly about the input of tourism to the growth of the Barbadian economy over the last couple of years. The resilience of the Barbadian economy has been shown to have been tourism-led. So we have had a couple of days last week a boon to the tourism industry by the English visitors here. And you ask any of the businesses who benefit from this increased amount of tourists here, and they will tell you what is the impact. Even the Transport Board, Mr. President, of which I know a little about, will tell you of increased revenues as a result of the English being on the ground. We are doing this World Cup next year, Mr. President, with the United States of America. And some of the games will be hosted there. But what is sometimes lost in that analysis is that the Indian and Asian community that is resident in the United States has been driving the development of that game to significant proportions. And they are also a rich traveling public too. This country will benefit, Mr. President, in a significant way in the summer months of June next year for this World Cup. And I can hardly think of any reason why the government would not want to put the necessary support behind getting Barbados right for World Cup. Mr. President, there's been concern about, and with no problem with that, concern about why we are spending this amount of money in the upgrade of Kensington Oval. And I want to say here that Kensington Oval is not derelict. It is not run down. It was built in 2006, and finished in 2007, around that period, and has hosted successfully cricket, whether it's regional cricket, international cricket, ICC cricket, CPL cricket, and other. We even had FIFA World Cup football matches at Kensington Oval. It has to be upgraded and maintained. So that to say that it has not been maintained is a little bit too far of a statement, because it is not a derelict structure. And I thought it was unfortunate to hear that there's an allegation that the governments, successive governments, have not been maintaining Kensington Oval. If that were the case, I would tell you, Mr. President, that we would not have been able to pass the ICC inspections that occurred earlier this year and before the English tour. So it should not go forward from this chamber or elsewhere to anyone that this is a derelict facility that has not been maintained. Mr. President, the large screen at Kensington was put in place in 2010 for the 2010 World Cup. I don't think anybody in here has a television that might be bought in 2010 that is still working in their home, given the advances in technology. Certainly, it would not be a smart screen television that if you bought it in 2010 and it's still working good for you, but hardly anyone would have one. We're talking now about where the cricketing revenue from advertising is not now dependent on cardboards with banners on the perimeter anymore, but real-time electronic advertising. So when the ball goes in the direction of the field, the consuming public on television all around the world will be able to catch a glimpse of that ad. To put in that infrastructure and those facilities, because if we want to be a modern, ultra-modern, I should say, sports facility, we have to upgrade Kensington. And Kensington Oval won all the architectural awards for the best stadium in the world in 2007 after World Cup. It beat out the Emirates Stadium, which came second. But we are talking now, after 15 years later, about to host a World Cup, and there is some chirping as to whether or not the government's decision to upgrade the facility, to modernize it, so that the advances in technology that are necessary as part of the bidding specifications of the ICC should not be accommodated. Now, the government has made a decision. Cricket is Barbados, and Barbados is cricket, Mr. President. I can tell you, Mr. President, that in the discussions with the government, we're in another hat, that the Honourable Prime Minister was very resolute that before any determination is made on the hosting of Cricket World Cup or bidding for it, that the BCA, the Barbados Cricket Association, of which I have the distinct honor and privilege to be its secretary of the board, was required to submit an upgraded cricket development plan. And we had done a development plan in the BCA around 2017-18. And one of the major challenges that we had was we did not have sufficient funding to move Barbados's cricket platform and infrastructure from that of running amateur competitions to semi-professional. Because there is no way in the world that we're going to be able to compete successfully in international cricket arena until we move all of our national sporting cricketing infrastructure to a level where we move from amateurs playing club cricket on Saturday until we move to a stage where we have people who can make a living playing cricket. And the government has come to the table and said, and the Prime Minister announced it in the budget last year, that one of the strategies of the government is to create a cricketing industry. And part of the funds from this loan will not only be to upgrade Kensington Oval, but the national cricketing infrastructure. I've heard articulated within the context of the resolution in the other place, and from my own interaction with this, a significant part will be played in terms of grassroots cricket and getting the local communities together to play organized cricket at the community level in Barbados. Because we have to reinvigorate our local communities and our young people, sir. And I have graduated from one who has played the game to now being a father who sits down in a chair and watches his son play the game. And one of the challenges that I see firsthand, because it is all right to say one is a cricket administrator, but you have to get down out there on the ground to see what is going on across the country. The National Sports Council just put on its Herman Griffith competition. And I want to say this, Mr. President, there is a love-hate relationship in my assessment with cricket in Barbados. We love the game, we love the legacy of the game, we love the rich history of West Indies cricket, but we do not put our money where our mouth is. And I've said from this chamber and on many occasions, all of the planks which supported the development of cricket in Barbados are being slowly removed, or some of those planks need to be reinforced. And why do I say that, Mr. President? Too many corporate entities in Barbados have stopped putting resources behind sports clubs. And I want to say this, cricket cannot succeed in Barbados unless all of the sports in Barbados are successful as well. It is our best sport. And I believe that if our best athletes are going to play our best sport, people have to be playing sport across the board. It cannot only be going at cricket. So that the national sports policy is very much important for the development of cricket and all sports. But cricket will thrive because it has its natural competitive advantages over the other sports. And this is not to say the other sports wouldn't do well, but I don't believe that if we only go at cricket, we would achieve what we want. We have to get our young girls and boys playing sports as a national policy. Yes, we have Shea Hope, West Indies captain. We have Haley Matthews, West Indies women's captain, and Craig Braffett, West Indies women's test captain. All from Barbados. That is a significant feat at this time in our history. And Shea Hope is an international star. But our facilities are rudimentary or non-existent. So we do not have, at the iconic Kensington Oval that people call the Mecca, I will not call it that, where we've had 3 World Cup finals, we don't have an indoor facility. So that you cannot go during the course of a match or outside of a match, go down to Kensington Oval now and practice if the rain is falling. You do not have the benefit of your coach being able to hand you a disc or a chip. Say, look, go back home, watch this video of your next session today, and let us see where you can iron out these kinks. These are things that you do in secondary schools across the world. We don't do it here. But that we can produce people like a Shea Hope, a giant like a Shea Hope. We can produce a giant like a Haley Matthews and a Craig Braffett. And our facilities are so rudimentary and still the same way that they were when you were at school, Mr. President, is a testimony of what we can do if we get our facilities right. So in our discussions with the government, that is why you heard the Honourable Minister in the lead-off of this resolution speak about dropping pitches. Because we cannot be the best in the world or compete with the best in the world if we are an outlier when it comes to the best facilities and the best technologies coming into the game. The Prime Minister has indicated to the BCA, tell me how much it will cost to get the best coaches in Barbados. And the best coaches not only to train players, but to train your coaches. Because we have just signed a memorandum of understanding with the government people of Kenya, who is an ICC member, who has played with cricket. But they're asking Barbados to facilitate them in the development of their cricket. Why is Canada, Uganda, and Ghana, and all these countries coming to Barbados specifically to sign memoranda of understanding to develop their cricket? Because this is what the world recognizes as our thing, Mr. President. So that the development of a cricket industry in Barbados is a serious commitment to the people of Barbados. The private sector has to follow suit. Mr. President, I said it before, I think I need to say it again. There was a time when the major banks and corporate institutions had sports clubs. They are too absent from not only the field of playing cricket, but Senator Dr. Hines indicated to me that some of the major hockey clubs don't even play hockey anymore. And the reason for that is because of the absence of corporate Barbados. Because where there was a cricket club, there was invariably a football club, a netball club, and a hockey club going on in Barbados. We have large sporting facilities being commercialized, all in the same area. Cable and wireless is now not in use. The facility there at Wildy, the bank's facility is now a chicken barn. Barclays Bank had a sports club behind there. There's still a bank. It's not called Barclays anymore. Wildy Sports Club. Texaco, Wildy Sports Club. There's still Rubis. And the BCA pays money so to ensure that the women's cricketers of Barbados have a home. At Rubis, so we are maintaining that facility so we will have a permanent home for women's cricket. But corporate Barbados has abandoned the sporting fraternities in this country. But we would bemoan the performances of the West Indies team. Like if we can get world beaters, just so. The world has changed. And this love-hate relationship is what I consider to be part and parcel of a lot of the question marks behind why government is putting its money where its mouth is when it comes to cricket. Only yesterday, a line that I attended, a colleague of mine who played cricket right throughout school, we didn't go to the same school with me, says, "My cricket what, man? You know, they don't got to cricket no more. I don't watch that." There's an apathy about it. And sometimes we need to use that as a motivating tool to relook the game and how we deal with the sport of cricket and other sports as well, Mr. President. So that, getting back now to our cricket, if we are going to be able to get 100 Barbadian young men and women professionally playing this sport over the next 5 to 10 years, this is the time for the society to come and join with government to facilitate the development of our national treasure, which is cricket. Mr. President, the government has put its money where its mouth is, not only in putting the facilities for the development. I believe the police ground will be one of the practice grounds that will be used for the teams when they are preparing for the World Cup matches. I think the Windward Cricket Ground will be one of the other grounds in Carrollton. These will bring added investment to those grounds and upgrades to those grounds, and also employment during the time that those grounds will be deployed during Cricket World Cup. And Mr. President, you will remember that there was a time when several touring teams came to Barbados during the winter months and played cricket. There were several cricket festivals. There was the Fred Rumsey Festival, the Pro-Am Festival. There was the Sagari Sobers competition, which I understand that we didn't have last year, which was a school's international cricket competition. We can't afford not to have these things coming. But as we speak, Mr. President, there are touring teams in Barbados now playing various clubs across the country. So what are we diffident about? When we know of the economic impact and the driver that CPL brings to the Barbadian economy. I saw a report online, I'm sure Senator Boyd saw it too, that CPL made about, the economic value of the CPL to the Caribbean was about $20 million last year alone. That is on the Republic Bank, major sponsor website. And that is a 6-week tournament, a smaller version to in the Indian Premier League. When a West Indies regional youth tournament is played in Barbados or the Super 50, it's about $2 million to host those things that comes into the Barbados economy. And one of the things that we will have to do is to get better at measuring the economic impact of all cricket and all sport to the economy. Because what we are losing is not being able to sit down with the decision makers, whether it be sponsors or other people, and to be able to sell the games or all the other sports in Barbados to the extent of their true value. I'm sure if the Hockey Federation were to do an impact assessment of the Bites Hockey Festival at the time when it was played, when Sennheiser played hockey a little bit for a few years, at the time, we will not be having the struggles that we have in the modern sporting industries in Barbados. We have to put more resources behind sports. We have to support government and the sporting agencies, and government also must ensure that its own institutions don't do things to mash up the sport. I would like to see, Mr. President, the Barbados Defense Force sports program return across all the sporting disciplines, not only in cricket. It made a major input into all of the sporting disciplines. Our first Olympic boxer came from that sports program. We've had test cricketers and international cricketers come from that sports program. Our football improved a significant degree with them playing in the BDF Premier League. Sorry, the Barbados Football Association Premier League. And I believe that it's time for us to revisit the cuts that were made to the budget. This resolution is necessary, and it is a priority. Not to say that the National Stadium is not a priority, because that has to be done as well. The hockey turf has to be repaired as well. We've just completed the refurbishment of the Geoffrey Silver's Gymnasium. But our sporting facilities, I've said it before, are too porky and they have to be upgraded. But let it not be said, Mr. President, that anytime a government is investing in the young men and women in this country, that it is not a priority. I can't associate with that. Because if the young men, if you think about it, Mr. President, 250 cricket clubs playing cricket on a Saturday and Sunday in Barbados. Take away that from the young people and tell me what's going to happen about here. Anytime I will define sports, Mr. President. Anytime. I have no difficulty with it. But it is a priority because it is a development of the young people in this country. And to let them know that if they want to become a cricketer, men and women, in fact, Mr. President, you know, a charity from England now launched the Barbados Girls Cricket Club. The Back for Chance charity has now come to Barbados and gone to Yorkshire in St. Michael and put hundreds of thousands of dollars in sponsorship to develop the first all-girls cricket club in Barbados. A charity from England. So I am to tell those young ladies who will join that club with the aspiration to play cricket and become a cricketer like Haley Matthews. You can't practice when the rain falling at Kensington because we ain't got any indoor facilities. You can't practice because we can't pull off the covers because we're still using the covers and concrete bricks to keep them down and not the modern rollers and stuff that we see when we watch cricket all over the world. Like Senator Hines said, Dr. Hines said, you got to fight at Kensington Oval, so you can't use the field because the field mash up. That is why we're talking about investing in dropping pitches. You know, behind Lords and the MCG, the world's most famous cricket ground is Kensington Oval. That is a legacy that we have to protect, Mr. President. That is a legacy that is a priority, Mr. President. And we have to tell this story. I would like to see, and I will speak a little bit more about it if I do get the chance to speak in the other resolution, about the development of the Fontebelle area, where Kensington Oval is prioritized. like any other international stadium. You see it from a mile off. It dominates the environment in which it is located. It creates economic activity around it. Looking glad to see the lumberyard going from right in front of Kensington. But we, just like how they have, the developers at the Old Hamels factory have redeveloped that facility, we have to take the Fountainbell area and maximize the benefit of Kensington. I've heard murmurs and suggestions that why are we having naming rights at Kensington Oval? Why they put in the name next to Kensington Oval? But Mr. President, from the time I was a boy, the Oval in Kennington, London had a commercial partner and a name attached to it. It was either the Foster's Oval or the Brick Oval or the NatWest Oval. That is how the Emirates airline or the stadium that one of the world's leading football clubs uses. So that we really need to wake up. We really need to up our game. And look, there is a lot of revenue potential that Kensington Oval can maximize, whether it's shared working environments, whether it's full-time rental spaces of all the boxes. I certainly, when I came to the practice of law, was at a firm that had a box there. My first meeting was at Kensington Oval, and they paid an all-year-round rental fee for that facility, and that was before it was knocked down for Cricket World Cup in 2007. Mr. President, as I come to a close, I know that Salary Contents, I said in 1933, that cricket is the most glaring example of a black man being kept in his place. And that is the first thing we will have to change. Cricket is the most glaring example. He was speaking in his autobiography, Cricket and I, in 1933. It was the most glaring example of a black man being kept in his place, and that is the first thing we will have to change. Because he understood what cricket could do for the people of the Caribbean and transform the lives of the society. And that is how we became the first greats in anything through the cricketing sphere. And it has transformed the Caribbean society. I will close, Mr. President, with the erstwhile words of C.L.R. James. What do they know of cricket? Who only cricket know? I thank you, Mr. President, and I am obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Nichols. Senator Kevin Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me. They will have persons who no doubt will shudder to hear me get up to talk about cricket after Senator Nichols. But the discussion, as tangentially weaved, and I must say I enjoy my friend's presentation and how he was able to incorporate different comments, ending with that iconic phrase by C.L.R. James, which I myself had intended to start. And it is a very useful starting point in the context of the present debate. Now, Mr. President, by now you should be accustomed to my style, wherein I go back to what is the crux of the matter that we are debating. And when we look at the resolution which is before us, we recognize our role as a Senate and where we stand in the proverbial pecking order of these things when it comes to money. So the stipulated resolution, sir, is for the provision of certain, if I may use the wording that is in the Senate paper. The Kensington Oval Management is seeking a loan in the sum of US 25 million, 50 million Barbados from Africa Export-Import Bank on these terms and conditions for the purpose of financing the rehabilitation and maintenance of sport infrastructures, plural, ahead of the 2024 Cricket World Cup. That's what it's for. Now, we've seen the debate go into the euphemistic statements as to cricket and how important it is as a culture, which I certainly agree with. We have seen, well, hold on, could this money not have been diverted to other means? But the government, for its policy, has recognized that this is a purpose which it wants to fund. Simply stated, simply put. Now, while you do have that right and you do get to determine what you fund, other persons get to chirp and ask questions and say, hey, well, why you don't fund this or why you don't fund that? That's what we try to encourage while we have these forms of debate. My thought process is one where I see the benefit to both sides. And I was at the same line that Senator Nichols referred to last night in terms of talking about cricket. And I didn't say much because I am not in that league. The point is this, Mr. President. While we recognize the utilization of a guarantee of a loan as the ways to get the money, I think that there is another opportunity available for the government, while not to meet the quick turnaround of 2024, but for future consideration. And what I would like to propose to the powers that be is that we find a way to tap in to this support that we have nationally for this game. So why don't we have a cricket bond or a Kensington bond which is floated for all these persons who have such love of the game to put their money where their mouth is, as Senator Nichols said. Because it's one thing to say that I love this or I am willing to do this, but how can we tap into this patriotic sporting ethos and say, well, this is the support that we need? And this is the type of thinking where if that is tried and it does not succeed, when persons come and question, you can say, but we have no choice. Where do we get it from? And in recognizing that there is an entitlement and it is necessary, this is a factor which the government can consider as it moves forward. So long story short, Mr. President, the quantum in my mind is not alarming given the volume of other debt that the current country holds. That's a fact, it's $50 million. What I would also urge, and I'm sure no doubt will be done, is when the aspect of the naming rights is being dealt with, that we get our most vicious negotiators on that task. Because some will say that we're selling the family silver. I wouldn't say that. But if you are going to name it, let's make sure we get the best price. So, sir, my contribution, very short, is simply this. We recognize the need of how you get money. You either get the money from taxes or you get the money from borrowing. Two ways governments raise funds. In this circumstance, utilization in the future can be considered of raising the money through nationalistic pride in the form of a cricketing bond in terms of Kensington for the developed. Let's try it and see if it works. And then, if it fails, we can return to the naysayers and say, but what choice do we have? I also wish to say that I think the comments by the two other independent senators were quite sensible. And I look forward to the government response, particularly as to the interest rate. There may be some of us who don't understand or appreciate maybe the time being, the length of time, the need for funds, the availability in the specific market that we're dealing with. And persons will seek to understand as to why the rate that is being offered is the one that was accepted in these times. And we know that interest rates are high on saving bonds presently. And you would know that, Mr. President, given your background. But all in all, I think that we can say we understand why the government is doing what it is doing, and we hope that as we continue this exercise that there are responses given which allow persons to understand fully what is being sought to be done so the necessary support can be provided. And we hope that the exploration of alternative fundraising mechanisms like the ones that I have suggested are duly considered in the future. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Boyce. Her Honor, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make a few remarks. This debate really reminds me of my days as a parliamentarian, sitting in the other place, and as a minister. I represented, I think, what is perhaps the largest cricketing constituency in Barbados, St. James South. It has almost every major cricketer whose name you can call either came out of St. James South or had some association with a club or relationship with the constituency. So though I was not a cricketing fan myself, I had to learn about cricket. It was absolutely essential as part of the service, and therefore sponsored many cricket matches. And the club there at, oh my goodness, they're going to, right there at the bottom of Waterman Village, really raise funds to completely redevelop that and so on. And I'm being nostalgic and reminiscing. And then when we were going to host the World Cup, I happened to be Minister of Housing at the time and very much led a lot of the initiatives for the making the lands available, the compulsory acquisitions that had to be done in very rapid time to have the lands available for the development of Kensington and its construction. So I have some intersections with Kensington redevelopment at an earlier time, and would wish just to make a few remarks in respect of this debate. I want to start with the fact that it fascinates me in Barbados that whatever governments attempt to do, there is significant criticism of it. People don't wait to see how it's going to turn out. They often don't bring any rational or analytical reasons to it. They simply start to criticize, and that creates its own momentum and feeding frenzy, and then you get people all over the place making comments. But the same people who will tell you that this is too much money to spend on Kensington, particularly at this time when the government say broke, are the very ones who will tell you, well, it's a big shame that they let the stadium drop down and you can't use it and look at it condition, etc. But we cannot have it both ways, as we always seek to do in Barbados. Either we are prepared to spend the money, to find and spend the money to ensure development, to maintain property, to ensure sports and other activity takes place, or we are going to let it all fall down like the stadium and then say and throw up our hands. This government is not adopting that approach. We saw the stadium fall down virtually under a previous administration. This administration made the investment to first build Kensington and outfit it, and now we are investing further resources in its maintenance, upkeep, and redevelopment to take it into the future, to make sure it continues to be fit for purpose and does not become an iconic place that once was. So let us understand that there's a cost to it, and we know that construction costs have risen exponentially in the last year. We know this is a fact. We know that when you maintain or when you build buildings such as this sort, you have to have commercial grade everything in order for them to last the time and to take the beating in inverted commas, of course, of the use at commercial scale. So it is expensive to do this and to equip with the kind of specialist equipment that sports facilities require. The second key to looking at this expenditure, Mr. President, is, in my view, to ask ourselves whether or not Barbados wants to be known for the development of cricket and other sports. Jamaica is known for its sprinters, but it has invested in resources, equipment, training to get the result that you see at the international level. We have a competitive advantage in relation to cricket. Government is therefore now putting behind that competitive advantage an investment on which we expect to see a rate of return. Now, I am not a business person. I am a people's person and a politician. That rate of return may not be seen directly in the dollars and cents, but it will be seen by the production of high-quality cricketers who will be brandishing and enhancing the name of, burnishing and enhancing the name of Barbados at the international level. It will be seen by the increased numbers and people who want to come to Barbados to watch sports here because of the high quality of the cricketers. We have a point very well made by Senators Nichols and King. It will be seen by the people who make money from cricketing activity. Well, in the repatriation, first of all, of the money that the cricketers themselves make. Because they bring their money home. They build homes in Barbados. They employ people in Barbados. Their children go to school here. So we will see it come back to us. But it isn't only going to be seen by cricketers and sports persons. It will be seen in the stores owned by small entrepreneurs who, when women are going to cricket, will say, look, I want to go and get my nails done or my hair done or buy a new dress or a new pantsuit. It will be seen by snow cone vendors and the nutsmen that you see around cricket matches, and everybody knows them. They have their nicknames. You're able to identify them. It will be seen, Mr. President, by the manufacturers. Every time there is cricket in Barbados, beers sell out. Rum sells, liquor sells. The shops in the country, the cook shops. You can't get in mustard. You can't get in the shop there, the shop on Holders Hill, and again, I don't remember the family's name. My memory is really failing me. You can't get it. Marshalls. Mother Cat died while I was in the US, but the Marshalls. There were some boys, the father and their boys, who held the shop, but the Marshall shop on Holders Hill. Chris Place, further down at Rockdundo in St. Peter. These are iconic watering holes, particularly during cricket, and places around sporting facilities that cricketers themselves frequent and therefore attract large numbers of people. Cuz will get more customers. Oystins will be rammed. People, St. Lawrence Gap will be burst. The reality is that when you invest in cricket, when you put the money in, it isn't just cricket that benefits. People, you can't get a rental car. A lot of other ways in which the money spills over, and it isn't trickle down, it is gushing over into other sectors of the economy, and that is why the investment is being made. It is made to reap a rate of return, not in a narrow sector or a narrow stream, but across several sectors for several other persons who are not even directly employed by cricket or by sports. That is why this investment is important. It isn't just that we are putting the money into Kensington. And what is the cost of investment? When I did my MBA, you know, you look at cost-benefit analyses, you look at your rate of return, you look at what you put in, what you get out, what depreciation and other costs would be. But this is a formulaic way of approaching the matter. The reality is that government is an enabler of development and an enabler of growth. Businesses are there to make their investment, to make a profit. That is not the role of government. It is the role of government to make the investment so that Gene Chase, little boy who is in primary school at this moment, can become a cricketer 10 years from now, playing first class cricket. There's no dollar value that you can put on that and on what he will bring back to the country. And though I understand, because my father was a businessman, and though I have run my own law practice and my own consultancy business, successfully I might add. I did not make millions, but I make enough to be comfortable and to employ other people and to ensure they were comfortable and to give good service and to get a good name for being a good professional. But you cannot look at everything by virtue of a balance sheet when you look at government investments, because that is not what they are being made for. Now, having said that, while we are protecting and securing the national and the public interest, while we are maintaining this facility, as indeed we should, because government has a poor record of building maintenance. When you're hearing about sick buildings, you're going into places, sir, the elevator is not working. You have to, I'm not even going to say that, sir. You have to walk up the steps or stay home. You know, there's a problem with maintenance. So we cannot now quarrel, or ought not to now quarrel, if government says we are going to invest properly in maintaining Kensington Oval, given what it means to legacy, to cricket, to national image, to national reputation, to the potential for growth at several levels. Government must facilitate, government must enable, government must regulate, government must protect, and government must invest. And invest in ways that the benefits accrue to the wider society and economy. And that is what is being done here. So that the money that is being put into this for the development of cricket generally will see community-based sports take off and community-based cricket in a much more significant way. We have to look to more further investment in the gymnasium. And we have to ensure that we manage better as a whole. I close with these final 2 points. Having said all of that, however, the reality is that government agencies and government-related or government-connected entities often in our jurisdictions rely too much on government because they know government will not let them collapse. We run these entities, or these entities are run like old boys networks, where the fellas get together and drink a few drinks, but they do not manage in a strategic way. They do not look at the long-term interests of the organization and how they can build it. They make no determination as to what are their priorities to pursue so that they have the best outcomes and results and themselves make money. So that you take a number of government entities which operate in various markets in Barbados, compare them with private sector entities. The private sector entities are licking corn, to use a Bajan expression. But the government entities are marginal or not making any money. And it has to do with the fact that because they are government or government connected, we do not invest in the kind of management structures or the kind of managers who can deliver the results that are essential for the country. I believe that Comey, whether it is cricketing paraphernalia, I don't know how much beyond the books that of a few of the cricketers. I do not know how much cricketing paraphernalia you can get. Whenever there is a big match here or big cricketing games, there should be an event where people can come and meet all of our cricketing greats, get autographs, get photos. People would pay a lot of money to enter such events. Use the cricketing icons, the former cricketers, in a way that can make money for them and for us. Utilize the facilities. You know, this is the ball that Gary Sobers struck for how much ever, you know, in a previous match. You know, but people go to see that. And you see an old rusty thing, and they tell you that, oh, this was the dagger that Ivan the Great used. You know, you don't know if it is true or not. But you go somewhere, you plaster glass kitchen and tell you don't even breathe on the glass. You know, so we need to have museums, or musea, if that is correct, I think museums. And we need to really, what happens with these cricketers' bats? What happens with the ball that got knocked away repeatedly, like the other night during cricket? Nobody is keeping this material. We don't have paraphernalia that we can sell, or if we do, it's very little paraphernalia. But all of this can become an industry, whether it is cups, cups that, you know, the cups that people use now, water bottles, branded items. We just don't do it. And these are the kinds of things, part of what Comey needs to be doing. Utilizing people and branding items, really branding and maximizing the cricket opportunities. Because in the same way that people will go in oysters and eat fish and drink beer, if you have a cricket-related or cricket-themed cultural activity or sports activity, people will go. People will attend, they will pay. There are people who, when Wes Hall's book came out, I got him to autograph it and gave it to a regional prime minister as a gift. He was thrilled. And I think I may have made this point in here, when I was leaving New York as ambassador, I think it was the Pakistani ambassador, had made a great, I think he was from Pakistan, I don't recall, but one of the Asian countries, had made, was delighted. He actually stayed in office a day or two additional in order to, because we were establishing diplomatic relations between the two countries formally, because he wanted to establish diplomatic relations with Barbados before he retired and returned home. Why? Because he had seen Wes Hall play as a boy. That they lived in rural Pakistan or wherever it was. I don't think it is Pakistan. It will come back to me. And his father took him and his brother to watch the match in which Wes Hall and others played. And he regaled me that morning. I want to talk about investment and other related opportunities. And he regaled me with stories from that day and what it meant to him. And all those years later, a man of about 70 was saying, I want to stay in post for 2 more days to do this, set up international relations formally with Barbados. This is what our cricket means. And this is why the $25 million could never be too much. I'm much obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Thompson. Senator Dr. Moronite.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me thank all of the honorable senators that would have contributed to this debate on the resolution for the government guarantee of the US $25 million from the African Export-Import Bank to Kensington Oval Management Incorporated, or COMI. Mr. President, Let me start with the comments by Senator King, who implored us that even as we invested in the Kensington Oval and its infrastructure, refurbishment and upgrades, that we ought to make sure as well that we take care of the development aspects of cricket itself, that we ought to make sure that as we built out the facility at Kensington, that we actually had a game to be played there at a sufficient level, again, that would take us as Barbados to the heights that we are accustomed to in the context of our cricket. I want to remind the Honourable Chamber that we would have debated the Green Paper on the National Sports Policy, in which cricket was identified as one of the areas for special investment. And in that Green Paper, we would have spoken to a number of initiatives that were intended to be rolled out, including a high-performance centre, including investment in coaching, Mr. President, including the building out, Mr. President, of mini-stadia across various parishes in Barbados. I also want to note, Mr. President, that already the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment is undertaking a coaching development, a training for young cricket captains, Mr. President, to ensure that we are going to have captains who have the ability to lead cricket teams, Mr. President. That same ministry is also as well investing in the refurbishment of cricket grounds and community centres to make sure that they are continually used within communities. And as well, again, Mr. President, as well, investing in building out coaches across Barbados so that we are building an entire ecosystem in relation to making sure that our cricket development is taken care of. And that is not to say, Mr. President, that more cannot be done, that more should be done, Mr. President. But that is, again, when we have that, we debated that Green Paper on the National Sports Policy, and there will continue to be consultations. And this is why, again, that same ministry is investing in working with the sporting federations to build capacity and increase the government allowances to those associations as well, to make sure that they can continue themselves to contribute to the building out of cricket development and sporting development generally, Mr. President. I want to note, Mr. President, the suggestion that, as was indicated, that we are either looking to build a new Kensington, or that it is derelict. In my indication, and I ran through very carefully what the funds would be used for, I noted the assessment that was done. I identified the specific areas that the assessment indicated that we need upgrades, Mr. President, and I used those words, upgrades, Mr. President. And for the record, Mr. President, I noted that the ICC assessment indicated that we would need to upgrade the existing lighting towers, particularly to enhance deluxe levels. I talked about the Players Pavilion upgrade, Mr. President. I talked about temporary stands, the Southeast hospitality structure, bathrooms upgrade, Mr. President, painting and repairs, additional replay screens, Mr. President, and other upgrades, Mr. President. So that, as was indicated, it would be a fallacy for us to suggest that this money, 50 million Barbados dollars, Mr. President, would in any way be about building a new oval. What we are talking about here is a guarantee for the refurbishment and upgrade to ensure that we have a Kensington Oval that is fit for purpose, up to international cricketing standards, Mr. President. And again, and I want to stress, that the investment, as was indicated, is not only about building up Kensington Oval, but again, and I quoted it, I went right and I was very specific to indicate that it will also be about enhancing the practice facilities, and I identified them. The Windward Cricket Club, the University of the West Indies 3W Ovals, and the Police Sports Complex as well. I also, as well as Senator Nichols would have indicated, noted the building out of the state-of-the-art indoor facility and the drop-in pitches as well, indicating that we're not just doing investment in infrastructure for the now, but building out a frame that would enhance cricket development over the long term. And I believe that Senator Nichols would have spoken to that in very good detail. I note, Mr. President, the call for a business plan to be produced, the call for understanding why it is that we're doing this investment as a priority. And again, I believe, Madam Deputy President, would have spoken to the fact that government has to be able to invest in public interest, that government has to be able to ensure that it prioritizes those investments that are also about legacy, that are also about ensuring generational wealth, about generational knowledge and legacy. But even so, Mr. President, I want to assure this Honourable Chamber that the business case for this guarantee was very well discussed and examined, as I would have also indicated in my submission. The government, even before we knew about the Cricket World Cup bid, had invested within Kensington Oval for the installation of a photovoltaic panels across all the roofs of Kensington Oval, which is estimated, Mr. President, to have a rate of return of $500,000 annually for Kensington. And that installation will happen as soon as it is connected to the grid from February 2024. I also want to note, Mr. President, I would have indicated in my submission, the number of other revenue-generating activities that Kensington Oval is involved in currently, that they have proactively gone out and sought engagement with the Caribbean Development Bank in order to develop and to look at the feasibility of producing products and services, Mr. President, produced by small entrepreneurs that then will be marketed under the Kensington Oval brand. Mr. President, the naming rights, Mr. President, as well. The initial estimates for that would suggest that we can reap between 3 million to 6 million annually based on the naming rights. And that is just an estimate, because we will be the first in the region, Mr. President, the first in the region to introduce naming rights for our cricket grounds. First in the region, Mr. President, to do so. Mr. President, there have also been questions asked about the interest rate and why it is that we have accepted a 7% interest rate. Mr. President, I am not going to pretend that I am an economist. When it comes to economic matters, I go to the economists and have them advise me on these things so that I am careful in the information that is shared. Mr. President, I want to identify, first of all, that 7% interest rate really reflects the improvement in our credit quality under the BORT program. Because 5 years ago, the interest rate that we could have attracted was 13%, Mr. President, under the previous administration because of the number of downgrades that this country had seen. So that 7% that we would not want to criticize, Mr. President, is much better than the 13% that we were able to attract. Additionally, Mr. President, I also want to indicate that interest rates have been rising within the last 18 to 2 years. In fact, the Federal Reserve, Mr. President, just this year increases interest rates to the highest over 22 years, Mr. President. So interest rates are increasing overall. Furthermore, Senator Dr. Hines used as her metrics for the interest rates LIBOR. She used it quite a number of times. Mr. President, I want to note that in fact, and perhaps I'm unsure.
I want to write sometimes.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of clarification as I referred to LIBOR once and continued thereafter to refer to SOFR.
You intended to.
I did not intend to. I did, and I actually,
You did mention it a few times.
I repeatedly, after, Mr. President, if I may be allowed to continue.
Yes, continue, please.
After indicating that LIBOR has fallen out of use, I then presented the SOFR rate as well as the SOFR forward rate into 2028, noting that it was around 3.2%. Thereafter, I noted that as far as 2030, the SOFR rate, I not only said the abbreviation, but spelled it out, was around 3.2%. That is what I said. It is not my intention, it is the content of what I said.
Please continue, Senator Dr. Moran.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As I was indicating, there was a LIBOR scandal, and I think as was indicated, that the LIBOR is no longer used. And as was indicated, we are now using SOFR, and as of yesterday, that rate was 5.31%.
Mr. President, I rise on a matter of clarification, a point of clarification once again. As I indicated, same, exact same. So for Senator Dr. Monroe Knight to present this as some manner of correction does not reflect reality. I indicated that SOFR is 5.31. I have it written down and I read it directly from my notes.
I didn't hear any suggestion of correction. It was just a reference that you had mentioned it, and she repeated the same information, but there was not admonition or correction there. Continue, Senator Dr. Moran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. We are in the Christmas and festive season. So I will continue with a smile on my face, Mr. President. So essentially, Mr. President, we have a fair interest rate based on the current market interest rates, based on the current credit quality of Barbados, Mr. President, at 7%. I can also inform this honorable chamber that the initial interest rate was at 7.5. So Barbados did not just accept the first interest rate that was given, but we negotiated again what was the best interest rate given the circumstances and given the prevailing market conditions, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to also as well just speak to, the issue of, and I agree completely with Madam Deputy President, in relation to the issue of maintenance, and I believe that this was also raised as well by Senator Dr. Christina Hines, in relation to maintenance of the field, making sure that it is protected. And again, that is also one of the areas of investment, as was indicated, that we will now have enhanced covers in order to ensure that we can protect the field. So when there are activities that are outside of cricket, that this can be protected, the field can be protected. But I also agree that government needs to do better when it comes to maintenance. And this is why that even as we make this investment in relation to the upgrades, Mr. President, the upgrades for Kensington Oval, that the intent is that we do not have a facility that would fall into the level of disrepair But again, that we will then be able to see Comey come up with a strong maintenance plan in order to ensure the continued, Mr. President, the continued preservation of the investment and of Kensington Oval as well. Mr. President, finally, I also want to just respond to the question about the management and how we will ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose, not only infrastructure, but institution going forward that will allow the government, that will allow Comey to be able to maximize the investment, that would allow to ensure that we see the growth in the cricket development that we want to be able to see, Mr. President. The current structure for Comey has a chief executive officer. It involves, Mr. President, the oversight from the Prime Minister's office. It involves the level of oversight as well from the Ministry of Finance. And we are also seeking to make sure that as the board is continuing to build out, that it can attract all of the necessary skills, Mr. President, to make sure that we are able to have the correct institutional infrastructure. So we are doing that as we are building the physical infrastructure, as we are building out the revenue generation, as we're building out the institutional mechanisms that are going to be necessary to make sure that Kensington Oval is successful. With those few words, Mr. President, I beg that this resolution be now passed.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Meetings, the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed. Senator Campbell.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I beg to move that this sitting of the Senate be suspended for lunch to resume at 2:45 p.m.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:45 p.m. today. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting is suspended until 2:45 p.m. today.